They'd been chasing the trace for 14 months when I figured it out. I should explain. The Shenovar don't chase things. They don't hunt, they survey. Their civilization has existed for longer than ours has had written language, and in all that time they have never once used the word for anomaly without immediately following it with a classification. That's what they do. They find things, they classify them, they move on. The universe to the Shenovar is a filing system with a few empty drawers, and they fully intend to fill them all. The trace was the first thing they couldn't file. It showed up on cycle 1 of my posting, a faint spectral aberration in the primary survey data, too consistent to be noise, too faint to resolve. I was told about it on my 3rd day aboard the HFY. Senior Surveyor Tesek Owen walked me to the forward observation deck, a bright wide space the Shenovar kept lit at a flat noon spectrum that made everything look like a dental clinic. He indicated the readout with one dry, tapered finger. The aberration was a smear of displaced light, barely visible, repeating at identical intervals across every scan they'd run since my arrival. "It does not classify," Tesek said. I nodded. I was a scout, seconded to the survey compact as a token human observer, a goodwill seat on a mission that didn't need me, and at that point I was still being polite about things I didn't understand. 7 systems. They chased it across 7 systems. The HFY was a survey vessel, not a warship. No weapons, no armor plating, just 1,100 tons of the most sensitive scanning equipment any species in the compact had ever assembled. The primary aperture alone was a lens assembly 3 meters across, ground to tolerances the Shenovar expressed in units I would need a physicist to translate. Every surface on that ship was calibrated. Every instrument was sealed behind environmental housing. The crew moved through the observation deck in soft-soled shoes, speaking in undertones, as though the instruments might overhear and take offense. I spent 14 months watching them try to resolve the trace. They rerouted the HFY twice. They submitted 2 priority requests to the compact's central archive for historical spectral matches. They ran 11 formal classification attempts, each one following the same protocol: scan, compare, fail, log. The navigation sub-team got into a dispute with Tesek about whether the trace qualified as grounds for a permanent course deviation. The dispute lasted 9 days. It was settled by the compact's standing rule on unresolved data, which required continuation. The Shenovar do not abandon things they cannot classify. They persist. And through all of it, nobody thought to look at the lens. I need to explain something about the Shenovar because it's the whole thing. Their skin is dry, not rough, smooth, almost ceramic, cool to the touch. They have no oil glands, no sweat, no sebum, no biological moisture that transfers on contact. When a Shenovar picks up a lens, sets it down, and walks away, the lens is exactly as it was. No residue, no film, no mark of any kind. So they have never in their history needed to clean one. There is no maintenance protocol for it. The concept doesn't exist. Their instruments are built, calibrated, sealed, and left. If a lens degrades, it's from material fatigue over centuries, not from someone touching it with a bare hand. I learned the opposite lesson on day 1, during the orientation tour, when Subsurveyor Collis Vray walked me through the observation deck and stopped in front of the primary aperture housing. It was a broad cylindrical assembly set into the forward bulkhead. The outer face was sealed behind a dust-rated environmental cover. The inner face, the surface that fed the entire scanning array, was exposed to the deck, recessed in its housing, smooth and faintly blue-gray under the noon spectrum panels. Collis explained the tolerances, the materials, the scan geometry. I leaned in for a closer look. The lens was beautiful, a deep blue-gray disc catching the flat light like a pool of still water. I steadied myself with my right hand on the rim of the housing. My thumb touched the edge of the lens face. I didn't think about it. A man leans, braces, looks, steps back. That's what hands do. Collis moved on to the next station. I followed, and I forgot about it for 14 months. Then one night, cycle night, ship's time, the panels dimmed to a warm amber. I was lying in my bunk running numbers for no reason. The kind of idle arithmetic a man does when he's been aboard a ship too long and has nothing left to read. I was cross-referencing trace sightings against the mission log, and I noticed the first trace entry in the spectral record was dated to cycle 1 of my posting. Not cycle 2, not the week before my arrival, cycle 1. The exact day I came aboard and leaned into that aperture housing. I lay in the dark with that thought for a while. Then I got up, walked barefoot to the observation deck, and looked at the inner face of the primary lens. My thumbprint, right there. The pad, the whorl, the faint arched ridge lines of 46 years of living, pressed into a coating designed to survive a century of deep space radiation without degrading by a single angstrom. The oil from my skin had bonded with the surface layer in the first hour. 14 months of continuous high-sensitivity scanning had done the rest. Every sweep, every calibration, every transit recalibration across 7 systems had passed light through that print and carried a fragment of it into the data. The spectral smear, the unclassifiable aberration, the thing they called the trace. My right thumb. I stood alone on the observation deck for a long time. The amber light hummed. The lens sat in its housing, flawless except for one small oval of human oil that had driven 1,100 tons of survey equipment across 7 star systems. I took the cloth from my kit bag, a plain square of gray cotton I'd carried since my first field posting, the one I use for my binoculars, and I wiped the lens. One pass with a folded edge, steady hand. 4 seconds. I went back to my bunk and waited for the next scan cycle. When the data came through, I watched the readout on my personal terminal. The spectral line was clean. The trace was gone. Not faded, not reduced, gone. As though it had never existed. 7 systems of routing decisions, 14 months of accumulated data, 11 classification attempts, 2 archive priority requests, a 9-day navigation dispute, resolved by 4 seconds of cotton on glass. I sat with it overnight. A man should sit with a thing like that before he puts it into words. The next morning, Tesek found me on the observation deck. He was standing very still, which is what a Shenovar does when every model he holds for a situation has collapsed, and the replacement hasn't arrived yet. "The trace is absent from the current scan," he said. "Yes." "The data is entirely clean." "Yes." His eyes went flat, not narrowed the way a human's would, but dimmed like a display lowering its brightness. What changed? I showed him the cloth. I told him about the thumbprint. Day 1, the orientation tour, the moment I leaned in and braced my hand on the housing. I told him about human skin, the oil, the moisture, the residue we leave on everything we touch, every surface we steady ourselves against, every tool we pick up and set down. I told him the trace was my right thumb, refracted through 14 months of survey data, because no one had thought to wipe the lens. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he asked me to repeat it slowly, so he could log it. I said it again. He recorded every word into the ship's formal incident archive. When I finished, he walked to the aperture housing and examined the clean lens for several minutes in silence. I watched him work through it. Not embarrassment, the Shenovar don't carry that weight the way we do. Not frustration, something more like recognition. He was encountering a category of maintenance failure his species had never produced and therefore never anticipated. Biological contamination of a precision optical surface by a crew member whose skin exudes oil as a passive biological function. "This requires a protocol," he said. "It does. We do not have one." "No." He wrote it standing at the housing, entering it directly into the ship's maintenance archive. It took 11 minutes. He titled it Protocol 1, Biological Contaminant, Optical Surface, External Origin. He asked me to verify the word contaminant. I told him it was accurate. He accepted it without comment. The protocol was one line. It read, "Wipe the lens." I still have the cloth. Left chest pocket of my kit bag, folded into a square no bigger than my palm, with a faint blue-gray smear on one side that won't wash out, the ghost of a lens coating that came away with the thumbprint. I take it out sometimes between postings, unfold it, hold it up to the light. The smear barely shows. It doesn't look like anything worth keeping. 7 systems, 14 months. The first new maintenance protocol the HFY have written in 400 years, and all I did was lean in for a closer look.